Okay, Roger, once again, Mudfossil University. Today we're going into the electrical nature of the universe, and we're going to start out with the nature of matter and the attractive nature of atomic nuclei. Now, this is a magnetic trap, they're calling it. It's just a toy, but it is going to explain exactly the nature of quantum physics right now. Very simple. Now, this is what we're going to call the nucleus, and these are what we're going to call the electrons. Now, watch what happens here, and I'll explain as it goes along. I may stop here and there to stop, okay, to explain. Here he goes. Boom. You see that? It attracted it to a certain distance, and the reason is this is attractive and repulsive. Remember that. It does both. It attracts and it repels. Strongly attracts positively, which means all negatives will be attracted, and it just slightly repels negatively, which means all the electrons attracted will be repelled to just a very tiny quantum distance. Now watch what happens. All right, and you see it stay between these two? It's locked in that position. Now here's how he makes it. You see this? This is like an iron ring. These are the little negative magnets that he's going to put into that surround a positive core. Remember that. And that's how he's constructing it. Okay, so here he goes. He puts in these little negative magnets. Now they see they jump right up to that metal. There's no problem. They try to attract the metal. Okay, so now he's created a negative ring. You see? Negative ring pushes that negative. That negative attracts to that positive attracts to that negative. Alright, now he's going to take that positive and put it in the center. So now that positive is now, let's think about what he's got here. He's got a positive core, and he's got a negative ring around it. Alright, so now what is he going to do? It's going to attract the negative of this, but the negativeness of this is going to repel the negativeness of this. So now it's attracted and it's repelled. That's what causes the distance. And it will stay there until he shakes it violently. Now this is not a strong attraction. There's other ones that are much stronger, and I'll show you that one. Lathamans is fabulous. He's got one you can hardly get away from it. But anyway, this is the reason for quantum, and this is the reason for the molecular atomic attraction of all matter. Alright, so now let's look at Lathamans. Alright, he's got the same thing, but I don't know why his is so much more powerful. Well, watch this one. Now he comes up with bing. Watch that thing. It's stuck. Now what he's doing now is that's just the way matter at rest sort of sits like this, doing not much. Then he's going to start shaking it, and you watch, this will vibrate. And what that means is that's heat. That's all it. See, now watch. There's heat. There's some heat. Oh, it's getting hotter, 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 hotter. Shake it, shake it, shake it. Now, eventually, it will throw that electron away, and what that means is it's light. Okay, it's bouncing, it's shaking, it's shaking, it's violent, it's hot, 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 hot. And all of a sudden, boom, there it goes. That was light. Okay, so that's heat and light and quantum. A positive core ringed by negativeness creates a positive attraction to negative particles coming in, but the negativeness surrounding the positive core keeps that negative coming in at a distance. So it's held at a distance. So now let's take it a step further. Watch when he starts shaking this. It shakes and shakes and shakes and shakes. Okay, so what are we taking away from this? It wants to stay at that distance. If I force that in, it's going to push itself away. Bang, just like that. It's going to try to get as far away. Now, if I had a nuclear mass which was completely flooded with these particles around these extremely aggressive reactive cores, and then I compress this like they do with a nuclear explosion all of those negatives would be crushed in against these positives, and the repulsion would throw all the negatives away and keep the positives mostly intact in a centrally extremely positive core. The negatives are gone. That's what causes the rising of atomic bombs. Okay, these are the slow-mo guys, and this is an underwater explosion at 120,000 frames every second. 120,000 times a second. They're taking pictures. So we are seeing this evolve slowly, but we will watch. Now, the firecracker will explode inside here, creating a cavity. That cavity will expand. The expansion will exceed the chemical reaction. The expansion will create a tear in the fabric of space. That tear will be open and there will be nothing there, and it will be flooded with the electrons that are the ether of space. It will be flooded literally with electricity, and I will talk about what happens to that electricity as it floods into this cavity that this is created. So let's watch what happens. Slow-mo guys, fabulous. Watch all their stuff. Excellent, excellent. Now, here he goes. I'm going to open this up. Here goes. I'm going to turn the sound off, but there it is now. This is on the outside. That's on the inside. You see the explosion now. We have exceeded already the chemistry of the explosion, and we're starting to get lights show up. We have now got this layer inside that has exceeded. You see all the little flashy little lights? I hope that shows up on the video. It might not, but if you go to this, you'll see it. Now, it's expanded. Now, what's happened here? You see inside? Look over there. I'm going to stop for 1 second. It had expanded so far out that it had used up its chemical reaction. It was gone. Done, done, done. No more energy inside there other than what was just sort of left over here, a little bit of heat. However, as it collapses, we're going to see this turn into an extreme brightness because it's sonoluminescence. And how does sonoluminescence happen? It happens because this boiling mass, which you will see actually literally have boiling, is now 100% electricity, which means it's loaded with electrons. Nothing but electrons in this layer. That is electricity. And they say that sonoluminescence creates millions of degrees of temperature, which is electricity. Electricity is millions of degrees temperature as it flows. That's just the nature of electrons. Now, watch what happens here. Don't forget, that's already extinguished itself. And now it's going to grow as it crushes itself. And what is it crushing? It's crushing those electrons against each other. Why is that a problem? They don't want to be next to each other. They will boil. They will heat. They will shake and shake. Get away. Get out of here. Get out of here. Well, and then you have this intense amount of electricity and light and electric discharge. So watch here. It's going to boil like absolutely incredibly. Here it goes. All right, here it goes. Boiling, boiling, boiling. See it? Those electrons are saying to themselves, where am I going to go? What am I going to do? This guy's over here is saying, uh-oh, what's all they're coming all in here. What are we going to do with them? So I don't know. They're crushing each other. So get out of my way, get out of my way. No, 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 no. And it's getting hot and hot, and they're starting to punch each other and starting to throw things. And they're getting hotter and hotter and hotter and glowing. It's getting hotter and meaner. And boom, there it goes. Now, this is a slower, we're seeing the outside, and boom, it's gone. So what does that tell us just happened? It crushed those electrons in such a violent manner as they had nowhere to go, and they could not get back into this water because I believe it creates either some kind of a hydrophobic reaction somehow. The electrons are kept gathered, let's say that, into that cavity, and they are crushed. Now, it's just an enormous amount of reaction that occurs because of that crushing of literal electrons. It's a boiling of electrons. And there's possible free energy here. It's a firecracker in water. I am a simple person, simple-minded. I've been called simple-minded my whole life. And I am. I'm simple-minded. I see these things and I see that's simple. It's simple to me. All this stuff is simple. There's nothing here that's hard. Everybody says to me, well, it's simple. It's simple. Well, of course it's simple. Why doesn't anybody pay any attention to it? It is simple. I'm simple-minded, that's all. If you're simple-minded, you'll see it. If you're not simple-minded, you want to make everything complicated, well, good for you. But it's not, it's not reality, my friend. This is reality. Okay, it's Mud Fossil University, Roger once again, in the nuclear range. Now, this is Mud Fossil University up here on Facebook, and today we're going to be talking about nuclear reactions and anti-gravity. Now, I have been saying right along that the actual atom is not understood, the nuclear forces are not understood. And John Hutchison, who I am going to refer to quite a bit here in this video, has shown that anti-gravity is quite possible, and he has done it. Now, speaking of that, a nuclear explosion is essentially anti-gravity. Now, let's watch this nuclear explosion, and then I will explain to you why I say this is anti-gravity, and then we'll read through a little text, and then we'll go into some other stuff. Alright, now watch this. Boom, there it goes. Now, I'm going to stop it here and there. Now, the initial explosion is just enormous, and it starts to raise. And at this point, you have had the compressive forces on the enormous dense mass of nuclear material, uranium, plutonium, that type of thing, and it is forcing it in together where everything is within others' regions, and that is not allowed. And the first reaction will be extreme bounce, and all of the electrons will fly off in every direction as an extremely brilliant light, and then the core will be essentially a positive mass. The Earth is a positive mass. The Earth attracts electrons, which are negative masses. It's light. Now, once that core goes positive from the bounce of all of the little bitty particles, they just go bouncing away because they've been forced in where they're not supposed to be. And then they all try to repel each other, and the only way they have to go is outwards. So now you end up with a positive core that goes straight up in the air because it's being pushed away from the Earth. It's a positive against a positive, up it goes. You'll notice up here will be the ball of power, and that power is the reconstitution of that positive mass to the ether that is in the air, which is the negatives. And now that positive mass is sucking them all back in, and it's identical to sonoluminescence, and I will show you that. So here we're going to continue on. We've had the compressive forces. Now we're having the explosive forces. Now the positive mass will rise. Watch it. It'll suck everything right off the ground with it. Here it is up there. That's where the mass is now. It's not down here anymore. And it is recombining with the ether that surrounds it. Look what it's doing. It's sucking everything right off the ground. Now, and that's the positive mass right up there. So that's where the explosion is now. So the initial thing is the compression, the electronic emission, which is the white light, just literally burns everything in the area because it's like a laser, but just everywhere. Then the nuclear particles also bounce out some, but not a whole lot, and the other ones begin to reform into lower energy particles and recombine with electrons to create, heavy metals and things like that. But look, it's sucking it right off the ground. So if you can't see that, I don't know what else to say. That is what I'm calling anti-gravity. Boom, there it goes. Up it goes. Positive, pushed away from a positive earth. And I'm going to show you other examples of why I make these claims, because I can see these things occurring, and I think I understand the atomic molecular action, and I think I understand what John Hutchison has presented as well. Alright, so we know that there's the electrons, and then there's the nuclear particles. Electrons are little tiny things, and then neutrons and protons are big things. Now, I claim there is no neutrons, that the neutrons are literally negative particles. The same as a neutron, only they're negative, and which are obviously negative. They're always, always, always glued to a proton. Alright, always. You don't see them rolling around ever by themselves. So let's talk about light is the electronic side, and the nuclear side will be over here. So here we go. We're talking about light energy. It's power, they're little electrons, versus nuclear energy, which is protons and the neutrons. Only the neutrons, I am saying, are negatrons. So there is no neutrons. So it's electrons versus protons and neutrons, which there is no neutrons. So what is the difference? Well, electrons are extremely lightweight. They're a unit of one versus the heavyweights, which are the protons and neutrons, and they always come together. There's always a proton and a neutron. They are never separated. I think they call it a nucleotide or something like that. Some fancy name they've come up with it. So there's one of these to 3,600 weight of these, because there's always two of these. There's always one to a proton, which the proton is always hooked to a neutron. So the proton is 1,800, the neutron is 1,800. Between the two of them, you got 3,600. Now, what else about light? Light is always dark in a vacuum. It's dark in a vacuum. There's nothing for it to bump into. It has to have nucleated particles to bump into, and I'm going to explain that very carefully very soon. So it has to be dark in a vacuum. There's nothing to bump into, and light are always negative particles, so they stay away from each other. They just don't interact. Now, nuclear particles illuminate in a vacuum. They illuminate fine. There's a space station, satellites, all those things that are floating around in space, they light up. All the planets light up when it hits them. So anything that has nucleuses, it lights up fine in the vacuum, because space is nothing more than a vacuum. A guy walks out, does a spacewalk, he's getting hit by light, you can see him. So he illuminates. Now, what else about light and electrons? Because now we're coming out of this versus that. So spinning tiny particles which are emitted as light. They're the tiny little electrons, only they're shaken so violently that they get thrown out of the mix, like from the sun, and they get spun off into space as a single spinning free particle. Alright, so that's by itself, a free particle, that's light. Now, there is also electrons that aren't light, and what are they? They're electrons in orbits around nucleuses. We understand that. They're just best stuff all over here. They have full, complete matter, and they have a bunch of little electrons around them, and space is like 99.9% nothing. It's a bunch of little particles surrounding a bunch of bigger particles. That's all it is. And then they interact with each other. Some of them help each other and hold on to each other. That's called bonding. All right, now, so we have electrons that are in their orbits. We understand that. They're all floating around the nucleuses of all the things that are matter. Now, what else is electrons do? Electrons are also ether. And what is ether? Ether is this all stuff that's all over here. It's all over here. And I show ether in magnetic fields, in laser experiments and all this. It's very, very simple. It's very easy to understand. It is tiny little polar molecules that are floating in air, which are these light particles. And I don't know if there's more than one of them hooked together, but they are floating in air, and they illuminate in air, and they collect on your body as static. And they are the things that conduct electricity in the air. And that's what they are. All right, so, and I show them in the experiments. I'm going to show you that stuff right now. This is about John Hutchison, and this is the Hutchison effect channel, and it's Hutchison effect. Solid iron bar begins to liquefy. Metal mutation, and he could do this, and I will explain what's happening. You're going to hear a buzzing noise. That is the frequency vibrations. He's oscillating frequencies, and you're hearing it, but there's frequencies you can't possibly get your ears around. He's broadcasting a lot of frequencies, it seems like to me, and he is hitting certain frequencies that shake these actual electrons within their orbits so much that they disassociate from each other, and the metal falls apart. You hear that sizzling? That's an iron bar. Watch what happens. It just fall apart. And it doesn't get hot either. You'll see a little bit of smoke, he says, but there's no heat to speak of. And it doesn't take long. We're only into this for 24 seconds. There it goes. Look. See the heat? A little bit of heat, but no heat really. See that? It just disintegrates all by itself because the actual molecules inside have shaken so badly that their structure has just lost its way. It's turned like almost into a liquid. Well, it has turned into a liquid, literally, but a sort of a slow-moving molasses type of a liquid. And there is a little tiny bit of smoke given off. I'm not certain what that is. I think that might be, well, I really have no idea, to be perfectly honest with you.
Changing into transmuted unknown metals.
You see that?
Quite a variety of obscure types of effects, wood impregnated into metals, other objects in metals.
They just shake themselves right into each other.
Magnetic fields written up in many journals.
Let me tell you something. If you take two, well, as a matter of fact, let me show you it. All right, I'm going to let this play. The gist that you're going to take away from this is that these two gauge blocks, they use these for sizing, they're very precise blocks, and they are so smooth on their edges that when you put these together and twist them, their electrons interface with each other, and it doesn't even know there's two pieces of metal there. It's the same molecules, and now all the electrons that were on the face of each one of those have now combined, and it literally thinks it's a single thing. Watch.
These are two pieces of metal. They aren't magnetic, and they don't have any adhesives of any kind on them. The surfaces are smooth, and they don't have any noticeable grooves. I can touch them together, and they don't stick. However, if I slide them together like this,
now this is
they
the
stick
key.
together like super magnets. They are clearly stuck together, and I can't even pull them apart. If I twist them apart, they'll go back to being separate pieces of non-magnetic metal. What's happening? Well, these are actually gauge blocks, which are blocks of smooth metal that are precisely manufactured to be certain lengths so machinists can calibrate.
Okay, I'm not going to bother going any further because they speculate on it might be this, it might be that. There's no error between them. The key is that they have taken and twisted the molecules against each other in such a manner as to force the electrons to intertwine with the electrons on each other's block. Alright, if you've been following me, you know I do a lot of ancient text, and this is something here that just blew my mind. Now, there's a thing about Nibiru, and one of the guys there escaped from Nibiru, thought they were going to kill him, and he got out of there, and he's the one that actually found the gold on Earth. But as he left, it said that he went in and he used some water. Well, it didn't say in the beginning about the water, but later was the water. But he started up this spaceship, and the glowing and crackling sound of the blue crystals signaled that he was ready to take off. Now listen to this and watch this. This blew my mind. This is Hutchison effect stabilized quartz crystal high voltage resonator, Hutchison effect. Now, you hear that and you see that blue crystal? You see that? Now, Hutchinson could do anti-gravity and has done anti-gravity, and he's doing it with frequency and oscillations created by vibrating molecular frequencies, and I believe it has something to do with oscillating crystals like this. Now, that's all I can tell you. And then when they came back to Earth, they needed to have water so that they could, I don't know, cool these, or I believe it was to cool the crystals. And they had to actually go to Mars. But that blew my mind, that one right there.